What is up, faithful friends and family? This is the Live Laugh Lopez podcast where we discuss all things life, marriage, parenthood, ministry, and so much more. All while sharing lots of laughs
And
along
tears.
and tears
Sometimes.
and tears along the way. I'm Jose Lopez, and with me again is my beautiful wife,
Natalie Lopez.
Yes, yes. And we've got a good one for you all today.
Yep.
Exciting. We got about, 3 more?
Yeah, we're doing these.
3 more?
We've decided to do like little seasons. So like our first season of our podcast, we focused on like relationships. If you watch that, if you didn't, go back. We talked a lot about marriage, relationship. In this season, we've talked a lot about like ministry, transitions, faith, different things like that. And our next one, we have some cool things up in store for you.
Yeah.
So
we're hoping to get some like interviews.
Yeah.
Maybe. Possibly.
So go back and listen too. Like if there's
bring some guests on. Possibly.
If there's an episode you missed, check it out. Yeah. We definitely want to bring on some guests, and we have plans. So
we have ideas.
We're excited.
In the pipeline.
Yeah.
So we are excited. But today we want to continue this like idea and theme. We've kind of been talking about a lot about faith,
transitions,
ministry, transitions, seasons, and
change.
Really focusing in on honing in on faith. And today we want to talk about something that's very hard for so many people, including ourselves, which is
waiting on the Lord and trusting his timing.
Ooh. Waiting on the Lord and trusting his timing.
Yeah.
I feel like we should put like an awkward pause.
Well,
just to like
I think it can be hard. I would say out of the both of us,
I'm the most patient.
He's the most impatient. And
how dare you?
Yeah, you can cast your votes, but I think we would agree. I don't know. I would know more because I don't feel like you always show that you're impatient.
I'm impatient.
Yeah, I think people would agree.
100%.
Yeah, you're impatient.
I'm impatient.
Yeah, and I also
100%.
think I'm a teacher, I'm a mom, but especially being a teacher, like you really flex those patient skills. You have to have patience to teach middle schoolers and to teach high schoolers. So yeah.
I don't know. I think I have patience for certain things more than others. I'm impatient when it comes to getting what I want.
Yeah.
I think.
You're a go-getter.
I'm a go-getter. I'm always hustling, always thinking about moving forward, and I don't like to sit still. So I'm very impatient in that way. You would love to just sit in a moment for as long as you possibly can.
Yep. I'm totally okay with that. Yeah, that's me.
But yeah, no problems waiting whatsoever.
No, I have problems waiting. Like I can be impatient, but I also think that it's different. Like I think too, when you know that you can trust the Lord, which we're going to talk about, like it changes the game, it changes the waiting game and different things like that. So yeah. So do you want to share like, what are some of the struggles with waiting? Like, why do people struggle?
I don't
or what you struggle with waiting.
I mean, personally, I mean, for me, I think it's instant gratification. I just want what I want now and don't want to wait.
Yeah.
And that can be very frustrating, like I don't like to sit still. And the only way sometimes I feel productive is when I'm doing something. And if I'm not doing something, then I tend to get really impatient and very antsy.
Yeah.
I start to feel like unproductive, which is what we've been talking a lot about in this season.
Yeah.
But I'm genuinely learning that, productivity and rest look totally different in this time.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's something that like you've struggled with, and you've admitted like that during this time, it's been really hard for you to sit still and to like be patient because you are like a very productive person. You are like a strong leader type of person, and you have like a high capacity for things. So I think part of why we wanted to talk about the topic is because we were like talking with friends and just like even amongst conversations with ourselves about like how important it is to be in this waiting season with the Lord, but also how hard it is for us, especially for you. Like it's been harder.
because we've kind of labeled this time a sabbatical, right?
Yeah,
like just
a self-imposed
self-imposed
that
sabbatical.
we decided to take for ourselves.
You know, it's not like we got in trouble or anything like that.
Or that.
But we just genuinely feel like the Lord has called us into a time of rest. And we know that the Lord is leading us back into ministry at some point, one way or another. But in this season, the Lord is just kind of like, just want you to hide and rest a little bit. And that can be impatient for me, because I genuinely enjoy ministry. I love ministry.
I do too.
Yeah. I mean, I just love building the church and being part of the church. And so it's hard because I just want to do and go and run and build and, and dream and all that stuff. But the Lord says all in due season. And I think it's important that we understand the importance and the value of waiting, because as we talked about in this before, there's a season and a time for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And everything needs to be done in its due season.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, it actually could be to the detriment of your purpose, your calling, your family, your relationship, your own personal, emotional, mental, spiritual well-being.
We can think of situations, people, even times in your life, times in our life, where we've tried to like get ahead of it or rush things or try to like make something happen instead of waiting on the Lord. And sometimes they can be very minor decisions, but in some cases it can be like, let's say you're in a rush, you have like these goals in mind. Like, I want to be married by the time I'm 30. I want to have a child by the time I'm 33. I want to like have all of these things. And so sometimes we can like rush those things because we're, instead of like waiting on it, we're like, I also think like there's a cultural and a societal pressure to achieve certain things at a certain time. There might be self-imposed pressure that you put on yourself, or again, it can be cultural pressure of like, these are the things that are expected to happen in this proper order. Yeah. And sometimes the Lord is like, no, I want you to wait.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you feel like you have an example, like personally, of like either for you or just for us in general, of things that we've like maybe tried to like rush into, or, and this is like, you have the freedom to be as honest as you want to on this, but do you feel like you have an example of a time where we've like maybe done that, like where we've rushed into something, or maybe got ahead of ourselves, or maybe, we just weren't able to wait on God's timing?
Yes. There's a few that I'm thinking of in retrospect of things that I would do differently.
Okay.
One of them I'm thinking about is like going into church planting at the time, like with our timing of it. I think that we were coming out of a situation. We were just coming out of a time where I think like we could have given ourselves more space to experience healing from the Lord. I think that Jose and I are like really resilient and like we're go-getter people. We're really strong. But I think we could have given ourselves a little space before we went into that season of ministry, which is why I'm grateful now that we are taking time, self-imposed time, that we've said, you know what, like, because we've been at full speed ahead since we were young and we've just kept going and going and going. This is a self-imposed time to just kind of be like, okay, Lord, like reveal, heal, build, grow, show us, develop. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I think for me, like probably that time, of possibly just giving ourselves a little bit of space in between it. You know what I mean? Yeah, but it's also hard because I feel like it was part of the will of God and like it was part of God's plan too. So I think I wrestle with that because I'm like, okay, in Natalie's plan, I would have given us time. But if we hadn't gone in, there's a lot we would have missed out on that we're still benefiting from.
Do you feel like we just kind of forced our way into it and kind of like paved our own way? Or do you genuinely feel like, this is a real question, this is totally unscripted right now, so do you feel like it was like, do you feel like we kind of went into it in our own effort with our own kind of like plan and methods and like kind of paved our own way? Or do you feel like it genuinely was like, well, it was the will of God, or you know what I mean?
Okay. So I think our heart was 1000% in the right place, but I think we were trying to make fetch happen. And the Lord, there were a lot of instances where I felt like the Lord was like, no, fetch is not going to happen. And it didn't make sense. Like it felt like at many different turns, the Lord was actually closing the door. Not to say no, but I feel like he was saying not now, not now. In retrospect, looking back at it now, I can be like, dang, like there were certain doors that I felt like we were trying to really push open. And the Lord was like, not now, not now. But in that time, we're like, well, God, we have the heart. We want to save the city. Like, I feel like our heart was in the right place.
Yeah.
But we also, I think in some ways we're trying to force something and make it happen. And the timing was off.
Yeah.
In retrospect, looking back, the reason I can say that is because after 2 services, the pandemic happened. It was like the Lord was literally like shut down.
Yeah.
But we were like, no, we're going to online.
And I mean, that's not to say that the pandemic happened specifically
absolutely
for.
not. But I'm saying like,
I get what you're saying.
We went from that into online.
It just
really
seemed
hard.
like it was like one thing after
then,
another.
Yeah, because then like we tried to do Sunday morning services. That didn't happen. So we had to gear for Sunday night. And
Saturday
then,
night.
Yeah, for Saturday night.
And then we went to Saturday night.
And then like we had a location, but the city was like not approving it no matter what we did. We jumped through like 7,000 hoops. And it seemed like at every turn. And I'm looking back at it now and I'm like, dang, Lord, like that was also your protection because we weren't ready for like what I think the Lord like wants to do. Like, I don't know that we were ready. I don't know that we had like the foundation for that. And I feel like in this time, the Lord's actually like, hey, it's not that the calling was off. Like I do have that for you guys. Like you guys are called to be involved in ministry. You guys are like, you have a heart for church planting or whatever the case may be. But I want you to follow my timing. And that's what I genuinely feel now. Like I can say it looking back at it, but I think when I was in it, it was like, well, no, our heart is pure. Like God, you know, this is the enemies doing all this. But I think the Lord was like, hey, he was like really, really, really very carefully directing our path into the journey that we took over the last year and a half, going into a larger church, learning the lessons that we literally had to learn. And I feel like the Lord grew us tremendously through the good, through the bad, you know? And I feel like that was part of our, like, I feel like this is all part of the journey. And it sounds silly sometimes, like people will be like, oh, well, that's an excuse or that. But I'm like, no, honestly, looking back at it now, I feel like I can look back at it in a way that's unbiased. And I think in some ways we have the trait of being like extremely determined, focused, and resilient. And like, what do you think though? What are your thoughts? Because this is literally unfiltered and raw. So it's like, I'm trying to keep it real and like.
This is not a part of our notes.
This isn't a part of the notes.
So
what do
this
you
is
think?
Really spontaneous.
I know.
And off the cuff.
How are you taking what I said?
I'm not.
What do you see in that?
I take it. You know, I think I still wrestle with it.
Yeah.
Personally, but I think you're right. I think there were a lot of signs looking back from a different perspective.
Yeah. You're like,
you know, kind of looking at it from a bird's eye view a little bit, and not just kind of just being kind of like retrospect kind of thing. I think you're right. I wish I would have been more open to really examining the call. And if I were to really talk about that time in our lives, I think I would equate it to having the right thing at the wrong time. Like I think
timing is important.
Yeah, because what I don't want people going away is like, oh, well, they were never called to do it, because that's not true. I genuinely feel we're called to ministry, but I think we went into it. It really is the problem with not waiting on the Lord's time. I think in my youth, and we really weren't that much younger, but I think just looking at it retrospectively, like there's a lot of lessons I needed to learn. And just looking back at it, I think it was just like, okay, I feel the call of God, and like I want to go into it, you know?
And I think the Lord used it in spite of all of our mistakes. Yeah. Which is, he's good. He's good like that.
Grace and
so
mercy.
I'm like, well, there's a lot that we got from that.
He's going to, you know, God is going to do, he's just good. And, you know, he's going to demonstrate his grace.
Yeah.
And he's going to use
your grace.
and turn everything and work it around for the good of those who love him. Keyword, love him and are called according to his purpose. So I believe that. I believe that God can work in spite of us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so
he can use us when we get in our own way.
yeah,
He can still like,
but it doesn't. It's not to say like, well, you have grace to get it wrong. That's not what I'm saying.
no.
I'm just saying like we should use more wisdom in ensuring that we're waiting on God to lead us, guide us, direct us, to pave ways for us. Because when we don't do that, when we give in to like, and a lot of it does that, like have to do with that. Why do we have a hard time waiting on the Lord?
Yeah.
Why do we have a hard time just kind of sitting still and waiting for God to do stuff or to make a way, to open doors, to a lot of it has to do with our own instant gratification, the fear of missing out, you name it. There's so many reasons why.
Yeah.
You talked about it, cultural and peer pressure,
Comparing.
right? Societal pressure, comparison, like looking at what others are doing versus like where we are. Because I've struggled with that all my life. Like, well, look at how this person's living and look at their ministry and look at what they're able to do and how they're traveling all over the world and preaching the gospel, or how their church is exploding and blah, and on and on and on and on and on. And so comparison will lead us to make bad decisions. And that's the problem with not learning to wait on the Lord. I think what ends up happening, which is what ended up happening with what we were talking about with Versa and church planting, we made a premature decision, looking back, premature position or decision that was really based off of like emotion, impulse, right?
Yeah.
Like being impulsive, being emotional, and really just moving too quickly.
Yeah.
And that's what ends up happening when we don't learn to wait on the Lord.
Yeah.
And you see that all throughout the Bible.
Yeah.
Like all throughout the Bible.
Because I think when you're trying to make something happen, and it's like, don't force it. Like, it'll happen how God wants it to happen. But then there's times where like you can get into your stubbornness and be like, no, I'm going to make this work. And it's like,
well, yeah. I mean, you see that all throughout the Bible, right? Like, perfect example that I would say is Abraham and Sarah and Hagar, right? Like God shows up, says, hey, I'm going to give you a child. Abraham and Sarah are like, what? We're really old.
Yeah.
Right? And God's like, no, there's going to be a child.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to give you a baby. And then Sarah gets so impatient in her waiting that she ends up giving her servant to Abraham, right? And then Abraham ends up getting her pregnant. And then now that the servant is pregnant, she wants to cast the servant out because now she feels like there's more blessing and favor on Hagar than there is on her. And so I just felt like, even just kind of like throughout the time that I have studied that story, that like you can actually, if you are not careful to wait on the Lord, you can come up with all kinds of plans to produce something that looks like the promise of God, but in the long run becomes an even bigger problem for you. Right? Like, if you are not careful to wait on the Lord,
that's really good.
And you become impatient, you can end up making decisions and producing something that looks like the promise of God over your life, that looks like it's what God wants, looks like it's his purpose, looks like it's his promise, looks like it's his blessing. And then later on, that ends up biting you in the butt and becomes an even bigger problem than what you were waiting for.
I think too, because like when you're trying to force it to happen, usually in situations like that, there's many warning signs and there's people with wisdom who are likely trying to talk you off the ledge, but you're stubborn and you're like, no, I'm going to make it happen. It's going to be fine. Like, I'm going to force this to happen. So I would say too, like if you're in that season of life, you have wise people hopefully around you. If not, like go to someone that is like respected or a mentor or whatever the case may be, your pastor, your leader, get someone's feedback on that. Because I also think that if someone tells you something you don't want to hear, that's not always a person against your life, or like they're not for me.
That's so good.
Because I think you can cut off the wisdom from God when you
Yeah.
cut off wise advice from people who are looking out for you and who are trying to guide you and trying to like, people can see sometimes your blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
They can be like, hey, there's people who are like, don't date or like, don't marry this person. Like here's everything. It's like
Yeah.
red flag on red flag. And there's a lot of people saying that,
Yeah.
but you're like, no, I am determined. I have my goal. Or like, hey, you might want to pause. I'm buying that house. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter that all your peers are doing it. Like, here's like some wisdom, and
Right.
you're like, no, I'm determined. So I think too, like,
And then you end up being house poor.
yeah, don't cut out wise counsel
Yeah,
that's
not
around you
everyone
that's trying to guide you because you don't like what they're trying to say to you.
Yeah, and not everyone's out to ruin your dreams. Not everyone's out to crush your dreams. Not everybody's
Some people
out to
just love
destroy.
you.
Like, yeah, some people just love you and they're looking out for you and they're looking out for your best interest. And I think the problem is that, like, when you cut those things out, when you don't allow somebody to speak into a situation
Because you don't like what they have to say.
unbiasedly,
Yeah.
constructively, whether you like it or not, you set yourself up for trouble. You know, and it's honestly a form of pride.
Yeah.
That, like,
But I mean, don't you feel like we've been in positions like that
Yeah.
in a way where it's like, and we're speaking from experience, like we're
Mhm.
36 now, but we've been together for a long time.
Mhm.
And there's like times where we were like, no, we know the answer. Like we have it together. We're going to follow like
Yeah.
our own thing. And then the Lord's like, okay, I'm going to let you because you want to. But
Mhm.
then you look back and you're like, all right, so this person was right. Like you go with your head between your tails, like, dang,
Yeah.
okay, I should have listened. And
Yeah.
and I think in instances like that, it's not an occasion to double down,
Mhm.
but also just seek the counsel from the Lord. Like, Lord, what are you saying? But
Yeah.
talk to other people. Hey, here's how I feel. Can you speak into that?
Yeah, you
Like,
don't always have to prove everybody wrong.
No. And it's tempting to do that. The petty side of you will want to do that.
Because what ends up happening in your effort to prove everybody wrong, you end up actually proving everybody right.
And you ruin your own life. And your life is worth too much to ruin it on, well, I'm just going to prove X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, you want people that are going to be able to speak into your life to help you and to set you up to make the best decisions that you possibly can so that you can actually walk in the full promise and purpose of God for
Yeah.
your life and not end up walking into some problems and headaches.
Yeah.
And that is not to say, because I think another thing that we need to talk about is that just because it's the promise and purpose of God, and even if it happens in His timing, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean everything works out the way it's supposed to
Yeah.
all the time. Like, I think that's important to talk about because it doesn't mean that like every door is just going to open wide, right? Like, there are situations and times where you wait on God's timing. God's timing is right. You go and you step out in faith and you're following the direction of the
Mhm.
Holy Spirit. You've gotten all the wisdom, all the counsel, and things
Happen
hard.
because life is life. Yeah.
Life is life. And honestly, the promises of God, the purpose of God sometimes is hard,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yeah.
walking in the purpose and the calling of God can sometimes be difficult.
Yeah.
And sometimes it does feel like you're pushing up against a wall. Sometimes it feels like you're pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and waiting for that breakthrough, right? But I think
Yeah.
the difference is the blessing and the faithfulness of God
Yeah.
over a season, over a purpose or a calling or a destiny, versus like not having that,
Yeah.
you know?
Because it reminds me of like when we had the boys and we were in like a season of like, we had waited on this promise.
Mm-hmm.
It was like having them. And then when we got the promise, all hell broke loose. And
Yeah.
they were like sick and we were facing all these issues and stuff like that. And it was like, yeah, but Lord, we got the promise. Like, we're here at the destination, but
Yeah.
it's freaking hard and terrible. And like, what's
Yeah.
happening, you know?
Yeah.
I think that kind of goes along with your point. And I think, like you said too, like something can be the right thing
Mm-hmm.
at the wrong time. Because, like, you know, obviously many of you know that we are high school sweethearts.
Mm-hmm.
And I teach high schoolers. And when I talk to my students and I tell them, like, hey, life advice, you know, don't take things too seriously. Like, you're still young. And then they're like, yeah, but Miss Lopez, when did you date your husband? I'm like, okay, we're high school sweethearts. But And we start doing, they like researched the statistics of high school sweethearts lasting. It was like less than 10% and terrible. But what I was telling them is like, yeah, but there's always like more to the story. And I don't give those details to them. But if I could give advice to like high schoolers now, I would say like, wait, because we ended up with like a lot of heartache in our story because it was like the right relationship, but at the wrong time. Yeah, we were really young to be having.
We broke up for a year.
Yeah.
Like while you were in college.
I was going into college.
Right. You were going into college or you were in college. And we broke up for a year. And that was the worst year of my life. But it was good for me because there was a lot of stuff that I needed to work through. And it's crazy that even at 35, 36, I'm still working through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But like the point is that like in that season, we were not good for each other.
No, it was giving.
It was
toxic.
bad. It was bad.
Toxic. Really toxic.
It was bad.
Yeah. It was toxic to the point where like some of our closest friends, one of our closest friends, she was like, yeah, if you guys get married, I will not go to your wedding. Like, this is the most toxic relationship I've ever seen.
You guys bring out the worst in each other.
Like, I've never met a couple that brings out the most terrible things in each other. And like,
why? Because you could have a good thing, but if it's not the right time, it's a bad thing.
And don't force it. Like, I think we were at that time also trying to force it because we're like, we're going to prove everybody wrong. And then it was like, no, you're actually going to, you guys need to break up.
Yeah, because if you don't, you're actually going to prove everybody right.
Yeah. And honestly, if we hadn't taken that time apart, 100%, our marriage would be horrible. Totally, and who knows if we would even still be married, honestly. Because it was like that bad.
Yeah. I mean, just thinking about it biblically, like you think of King David.
Oh my gosh. Wait. I'm reading. I just finished reading 2 Samuel. Like I'm going through my Bible in a year plan, and
look at the Lord.
I'm reading the story of David. I'm like, dang, this story is gory. It's violent. I was writing in my journal. I was like, Lord, this is like crazy. The stuff that's happening here.
I mean, if you don't know the story of David, King David was anointed to be the king of Israel.
But it didn't happen right away.
Right away.
And as I was reading the book, I'm like, there was a time.
The king before him was Saul. Drama. Saul made some pretty bad decisions.
Yes.
Right? That had to do with not waiting on the Lord.
Yeah.
Right? And so God removed his blessing off of King Saul and through the prophet Samuel anointed David as king while Saul was still seated on the throne, right? Now, David, there's some time passes. Saul starts to persecute David, right? David has some opportunities to take his life.
Yeah.
But refuses to do so because he knows, number one, don't raise your hand against God's anointed, right? He knew God had placed Saul there as king. That was God's decision. So if God placed him there, God had to be the one to remove him, right? And he also knew that if God anointed him to be king, then God was going to have to be the one to place him there on the throne, right? And we have to be careful to be like David, to be patient, to say, I know what God has called me to do. I know what God has destined me to do. I know the purpose of God on my life. But I'm not going to pave my own way.
Yeah, say that. It's good.
I'm going to surrender and put my hands or my life in the hands of God, because if God called me to it, he's going to have to lead me to it.
Yeah.
Right? If God purposed, if this is God's purpose for my life, then he's going to have to place me there.
Yeah.
And he's going to have to make the way. And he's going to have to open up doors. And he's going to have to lead. He's going to have to direct, because had David not waited, right? Had he taken matters into his own hand, killed Saul, taken over the throne.
I mean,
we would have seen that story go a whole different way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think too, like if the Lord promises you something, like you said, allow the Lord to fulfill that in your life and don't make it happen. So if the Lord is like, okay, I'm going to provide you with this job, or I'm going to provide you with this opportunity, and you're like, okay, cool, God, I heard the promise, bet I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to do this. And like, we can react on impulses, and you never want to make a decision based on an impulse. You want to use wisdom and like the right proper channels.
Yeah.
So I think that was a really good point.
Yeah, and that's why we're in the position that we're in. I believe,
What does waiting look like in this season?
It looks like not rushing into things that we don't need to rush into.
We just talked about this, like how yesterday, one of our good friends.
Shout out to Shaki. We were talking about this, and it's just like it's hard, and it's hard.
Yeah, and that's what we were sharing. Like you were sharing how hard it is.
So hard, because I'm like, yeah, but I could see it, I can envision it, I can feel it, I can taste it. Right?
Go do it.
I just want to go do it, and the Lord's like, no, stop, slow down, sit your butt down, and just relax. Right?
But you're like, I don't want to.
And it's crazy because one of the things that you asked me was, do you feel, are you afraid of like, X, Y, and Z not happening, in the future? And my response was, no, I'm actually more afraid of the temptation to jump ahead of myself.
Yeah.
Than I am that. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not afraid of not having support. I'm not afraid of people not agreeing or whatever the case may be. I'm actually more afraid of jumping ahead of myself and moving ahead of God.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like Moses right now and the people of Israel. God, we're not going to take a step unless you go with us.
Yeah. And I think that's been especially hard because coming out of the season that we were in, there was a lot of pressure from people for our next step. Like, and we probably get a message at least multiple times a week from people saying like, when's your next step? Let me know. Have you made a next step? Like, there's like this low key pressure.
There's this pressure
that people are not trying to put on us.
Can we just talk about that though?
Yeah, talk about it.
Actually, who was it? One of the things that we've been doing lately is we've been watching through the Marvel movies with the boys, right? We've been going through the Marvel movies,
skipping certain parts.
I've actually been, and you could attest to this, I've actually been trying to use those moments in those movies to actually kind of point back to the Bible to the kids to be like, hey guys,
life
this
lessons.
is why we don't give into bitterness and offense, because when we can allow bitterness, like there's a lot of really deep themes in those movies that I've kind of used to like help point the boys back to the Bible. There's a scene in the Avengers Endgame when they go back in the past and Thor gets to talk to his mom again. He goes back to the day she died and he gets to have a conversation with her. She knows that he's from the future. There's this whole dynamic, right? And he's like, I'm such a failure. And one of the things that she said to him was, people always fail at who they're supposed to be, but what really defines them is how they succeed at who they are. And that really like impacted me. Like,
he's like,
I'll remember that. No, like, thank you, Jesus. Yes, Holy Spirit. Right? No, but seriously, when you give in to all of the crap, I'll just say it like that, the crap that people say you're supposed to do, that people, all the nonsense that people say you're supposed to be. Well, you should be doing this. You should be doing that. If you did this, it would be phenomenal. I don't care about who you think I'm supposed to be. What I care is about who God says I am. And I want to succeed at who God says I am. And I don't care. I don't want to care about what people think I'm supposed to do in this season, not doing this season, what people think I'm like going to succeed at. Like, what is the Lord saying to me? And in this season, I'm not giving into pressure from people that think I should or should not do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, because that was real. Like, keeping it real. Like, when we came out of what we were in and we were coming into like a resting season, a lot of people were waiting for us to announce tomorrow that like, hey, come along with us. We're going to do this, that, or the other thing. And it was purposely why we wanted to take time, like to rest and to listen to the Lord.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is, we know that we are called to ministry. We know that we want to be involved in ministry. We know that we are passionate about church planting and like all of those things. But we're also putting ourselves in a position to like hear from the Lord, you know?
Yeah.
And I said to Jose, well, what happens if after the season, God's like, no?
Then no.
Then no. And like we've talked about that. Like we're like, are we completely open to?
Yeah. Then no.
You
like,
know?
If God says no, then no. If God says move, then move. We have some idea.
Yeah.
You know? But that idea comes with just this flexibility of humility and surrender to the Lord to say, okay, God, like we want to look, I've said this time and time again. I feel like in this season, the Lord has said to me, I gave you your dream. I gave you what you wanted. I let you see what you thought you should be seeing. I'm not going to go into detail to that. But I feel like in this season, the Lord is saying, okay, now that I gave you your dream, can I show you mine? And I'm just in a place where I'm just like, yeah, I think your dream is so much better for me.
Yeah.
And I think, can we be brave enough to kind of make that prayer, like to take that stance? Like
Lord,
there's
what are your
a
dreams
lot
for my life?
Yeah.
And
Lord,
what if your dreams don't look like what I
What
dreamt
if
for
God's
myself?
dream for you looks so much better?
It's different,
than what
but
you
it's
could
better.
even imagine.
Yeah.
It might be different, but it's so much better. You know how many people miss out on the greatness that they can have later for the goodness they could have now? I don't want to do that anymore. I just don't. Like, I want the greatness that God has.
Yeah.
And I'm no longer giving it. And I think that's where I'm genuinely beginning to start to feel the change, where I feel like I am learning patience. I feel like I'm just chilling. There's still a little bit of restlessness in me.
But I can say, can I compliment you? Pause to compliment you and then let you. I want to hear the rest of your thought. But I have to compliment you because coming into this season, like coming into this transition period, I was scared. Like I was genuinely scared because I've never known you to be somebody that like can sit in a waiting season because it's just, we've always been like, go, 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 go. So I was nervous about it. I was like, oh my gosh, like, are you going to be depressed? Like, are you going to be like angry at God? Are you going to be angry at me? Like, because I'm about this rest season as well. Like, what will this look like? How will our and it's really cool to see that the first week was really hard. I feel like the second week you must have had like your wrestles with God or like whatever the case may be, that you kind of came out with a mentality that you've had, that you've used, you've carried up until this point and hopefully like through the whole thing, where you really were like, I'm going to trust God. This is really hard. I'm purposely not going to build a platform for myself. I'm purposely not going to do X, Y, and Z, even though it's extremely tempting to do it.
Yeah.
Especially because, like I said, we get messages from people. We get like, people don't know, but it's like,
no, we get that.
But I've been proud of the way that you've really stood firm to be like, no, like I'm going to honor God, and like, and that's cool. Like, I think that I'm proud of you because I know how polar opposite it is for you to be just chill and zen and like, so good job.
And that's, it is hard. It's hard because you're right. There, like, it's not like there's not opportunities.
Yeah.
I've had invitations to go lead worship, to do this, to do that. I can jump on YouTube and do what other people are doing and do stuff on YouTube. But I just feel like the Lord's just called me to wait in this season.
Yeah. And that's not to say that like God has also been so good where you've had opportunities to use your preaching skills. Like we've been able to help people. We've been able to accept some invitations of like being able to speak and preach. So I love that the Lord is so good where he's like, chill, but also I'm going to give you a chance to like express that passion and like, you know what I mean? But there's no like ulterior motive behind it. There's no like, I'm doing it for this. It's like, no, Lord, I'm going to honor you.
There's literally nothing to do it for other than, other than just doing it and being faithful to the Lord. But like,
and it's been really cool to like be able to bless friends in ministry. Like something that we've been able to do, specifically more you than me, but I kind of did it a little bit, is help friends and family in ministry. Like when people go on vacation and like when
Yeah, when
there's
they need
breaks,
our
when
time
they
of
need help
rest.
on their worship, when they need help with preaching, it's been cool to be able to be like, hey, you can take that vacation. Like we got you, we have you covered. Or like, yes, we're willing to step in, go,
Yeah.
that's been really, really cool.
Yeah, to say yes so that
'Cause
others
we didn't
can
have
win. I think.
like that as much when we were in ministry.
Yeah,
proud.
it's not easy, but honestly, I'd rather be in this position with the Lord than to be in another position without Him.
Yeah. Doesn't it
And
seem like 4 months is a long way to go?
yes,
Like, because we still have 4 months of our commitment of like
of just
still waiting,
chilling.
listening, praying.
But I'm also like,
It feels
it's in the waiting. I'm learning that it's in the waiting where faith is developed and strengthened, right? And so, like, my faith in this season has gotten stronger. My certainty in not just my calling, but in my identity has gotten stronger. Like,
wild.
I am a child of God. That's it. Every other opportunity outside of that is just an opportunity to bring Him glory.
Yeah.
But I'm first and foremost, I'm not a pastor, not a worship leader, not even a husband and a father. First and foremost, I'm a child, and I'm learning to trust my Father.
That's
And
good wisdom.
and that's like, as long as I'm in the hands of the Father, I know I'm always going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so I'll wait. I'll wait. There's tomorrow. And if there's not tomorrow, I'll be in the presence of Jesus.
And we could come to the end of our sabbatical and the Lord could be like 6 more months of waiting. Like, we don't know. Like,
yeah.
you'd probably scream, but
Nah, I don't.
But I mean,
honestly, to be honest with you, I'm also a little scared of
what the
getting
heck?
too comfortable.
Yeah.
In
No, we've
stuff.
had that discussion too, because we've also, and we're like keeping it transparent. Like
Yeah.
we've also had the discussion where we're like, yo, we really kind of like this life. Like it's kind of nice being like,
Yeah.
but we know that that's not like the forever position, but we've also had the conversation of like, yeah, what if we like did this forever kind of situation? If we just
but that's like, this is a purposeful
time
sabbatical.
We've had so many good conversations.
Purposeful sabbatical. Yeah. That's really what it is. It's a purposeful time of seeking and waiting on the Lord.
Yeah. And I think if we could kind of like wrap up to just encourage you, if you're in a waiting season with the Lord, wait well. Like do what you can to wait well. Like do what you can to, not jump ahead of His plan or His purpose.
Yeah.
Do what He's called you to do in that time and do it well. You know what I mean? Sometimes a waiting season doesn't look like ours where it's like a sabbatical with literal like, hey, God, we're here. Like we're actually waiting on you. It looks different for every person. But there's too many like important things in life to rush ahead and to just rush into and to make happen. Like there's just too much at stake. So make sure that you're waiting on the Lord and you're not trying to make things happen on your own with your own agenda in mind. And be willing to hear what He has to say. Sometimes His answer at the end of it might not be what you love. Like we don't know at the end of it. Like, He's still speaking to us and different things like that. But you can trust Him and just be encouraged. Like it's worth it when you wait on His promises than when you try to force something in your own flesh to make happen.
Yeah. And we get that inspiration from Isaiah. All right.
You're coming through today.
I'm coming through.
Oh, wait, that's my favorite verse. I added that one in. Okay.
You read that, John.
That's my note because I put that in there. So I love Isaiah 40:31 that says, those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. And in other versions it say those that wait on the Lord, because I think that, like Isaiah said, when you wait on the Lord, and you develop that healthy like relationship and rhythm where you're like, you're waiting on Him, you're listening to Him, that trust develops in the Lord and that intimacy develops. And I think that, like you said, during this time, something that we're learning, it's like a sweet time of just trusting God and seeing Him come through in such amazing ways. And like, we're not going to testify to that today, but there's like so much that we can testify of that we can just share from our hearts of His goodness, of His mercy, of the way that like in the waiting He has met us. He has shown up in like tangible ways.
Yeah.
We've seen his presence like in ways that just don't make sense in our life. And, you know, there's such beauty in the waiting. And I don't think that it's something that it's not glamorous. Waiting seasons are hard, you know, especially like we live in a world with like social media. People can share where they're succeeding and growing and winning. And sometimes your waiting might feel like you're in a losing season. You might feel like you're not getting anywhere. But just speaking from experience, like waiting on the Lord is something that you will never regret. Like you'll never regret that. You will regret making hasty decisions, doing things in your own time, forcing things to happen, but you'll never regret that time waiting on the Lord, trusting him, seeking him, listening to his voice. So
it's good. Well, hey, listen, if you like this content, do us a favor, like, share, hit that like button,
share it with someone
button.
that might be struggling in a waiting season. Like if this episode encouraged you, like part of why we're here is to like share and encourage. So if you get something encouraging from it, comment, let us know. If, you know,
and
you
as
need
always,
us to pray for something, let us know.
Subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so that you get notified every single time we post up a new podcast episode or content. We love you guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for listening.